The learning is never ending. You're always learning, you're always trying to get better. There's always problems to solve, challenges to overcome, which keeps you on your toes. And, you need a lot of resilience to get through it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. It feels like very uncertain times indeed for the hospitality sector. A throng of closures, the highest insolvency rates in years, and we're heading into winter, historically not as buoyant as summer when it comes to dining out. But how are pubs shaping up? Jed Gerrard is Executive Chef and Culinary Director of Will's Domain Winery in the Margaret River, and also Executive Chef of White Horse Hotel in Surrey Hills, Sydney. Jed, how are you?
Good, thank you.
It's good to get you on the show. You are a hell of a busy guy at the moment.
I am. Have lots going on, but it's good to keep busy.
How are you managing, a role in Sydney and a role in Perth, sort of the opposite ends of the spectrum in regards to Australia?
Look, I'm very fortunate and have the ability to work from home, and I just go to site when I'm needed at Will's Domain in the Margaret River wine region, or I'll hop on a plane and fly over to Sydney to implement some menu changes and catch up with the team over there.
The White Horse has got a pretty amazing history in Sydney and has had many, many owners. Tell us about the project and what you guys are doing there.
It's a really exciting project, and we wanted to just reinvent what the kind of more casual pub dining experience is about and elevate that. So it's a really nice kind of elevated experience where we're giving guests the kind of exclusivity of a fine dining restaurant with the accessibility of a more casual pub dining. And what's really important for us is to giving our guests a really strong value proposition in the current financial climate that we're in, and for them to obviously have a really good time, to experience a really unique offer that they can't readily access in Sydney, especially in Surrey Hills.
There's been a lot of money poured into the project. What's it been like pulling it together? Were there a few bumps on the road?
Yeah, look, it's a really fun experience, and something that I really enjoy is coming up with new concepts for restaurants and the whole pre-opening phase of establishments, which I've been fortunate enough to be quite involved in the past. So the White Horse project, it was quite tedious and ongoing. There was a lot of compliance issues with the council that we had to work through, and we had to spend a lot of money bringing the building just up to code, and then also the fit out. But I think in the end it will stand the test of time, and we've kind of future-proofed it, and it's a long-term play for us and the owners.
How did you get involved in the project?
I got involved through Craig Hemmings, who's the director. Craig hired me to work at Black by Izzard at the Star Casino way back in 2011. He was the general manager, and we've just stayed in contact ever since. In this opportunity arose, and he felt like I was a really good fit for the kitchen.
What was it like putting the menu together? You mentioned that people's budgets are a bit tighter, and you really wanted to do something a bit different. Was it challenging creating a menu to fit into those sort of parameters?
Look, it was challenging. But what I really enjoyed was having the freedom to use ingredients from throughout Australia. In Western Australia, I focus only on West Australian ingredients and produce. So you'll find on my menus over there, there's nothing that's not from Western Australia. So that gives me a really clear little box to work within. But getting on board with the White Horse project, I was allowed to spread my wings and look into produce from all around Australia, not just Western Australia. So that was a lot of fun for me. We found a lot of really cool stuff to work with to give the place a point of difference, and just the the amount of variety of product that you can get in Sydney and the quality of it is just outstanding. So it was quite an enjoyable experience finding other things to play with in the kitchen.
It's interesting hearing the differences in the approaches with the two venues. Tell us a little bit about Wells Domain. It's one of the most awarded venues in Western Australia. But tell us about what you're doing there.
Will's Domain's all about offering a hyper-seasonal menu that's based around predominantly the southwest of Western Australia, and working directly with little bespoke farmers and producers, and making that work in harmony with the wine that we offer there. We do an a la carte menu and two different tasting menus, so we can cater to guests if they want to have that long lunch tasting menu experience, or they just want to kind of come in and have one or two courses on the a la carte. That they can do both. So that's kind of what it's all about down there.
Producers are really at the heart of what you do, both in WA and also in the new venue in Surrey Hills in Sydney. But tell us about some of the producers in WA that you've connected with that sort of feature on the menu regularly.
So they are super important, and going back to that point about giving guests kind of that value proposition is working with the producers, because at the end of the day, it's if you can gain really strong relationships with producers and make a deal with them that kind of cuts out the middleman and the distributor, that makes kind of is beneficial to both parties, we can get really good high quality produce at a cheaper price, and we can charge that cheaper price onto our guests. And then on the other hand, the producers also get a really strong price because there's no kind of middleman. So that's what we've done in Sydney on the menu to try and keep the costs of the menu down, with things like the Pardue Wagyu steak, which is a really beautiful high-end pure blood Wagyu product from the Pilbara in Western Australia. But because we go to direct, we can pass that saving that we make on to our guests.
Well, I want to explore what you're doing with both venues a little bit further on, but take us back to when you were young. Whereabouts did you grow up, and what sort of role did food play for you?
So I grew up predominantly in Balingup, which is a little town of about 500 people in the southwest of Western Australia. And it was in a commune, so it's a community environment, and my parents, I could suppose you could label them as hippies, if you will, free spirited, and that really reflected in how we ate, and the value that especially healthy food had to us. We would always have our own garden, grow our own produce. We were making kombucha before anyone knew what kombucha was, or before it was trendy. And, we had our big scobies in the fridge and had all that happening, and would go foraging for mushrooms when they're in season, and boysenberries down along the river. So we're very quite self-sustainable, and that definitely started my early passion for food, as well as my mum being an artist, which kind of gave me that creative side, and doing art with my mum and going through that was kind of, I always knew I wanted to do something that was creative, not just have an office job or something like that, something where I can really kind of get my creative juices flowing, I suppose.
When did you first sort of start to think of chefing as a potential career?
So that's I stayed in Balingup until I was 7, and then between the ages of 7 and 12, I moved to New Zealand with my father's grandparents, and they actually owned a small boutique hotel in Invercargill in the South Island. So I lived with them in the hotel. I'd go down and hassle the chef that was in the kitchen and do experiments, and I was really immersed in hospitality from an early age, I suppose. And I had no interest with the academics at school. I really enjoyed doing the sports and the home ec cooking classes and the social aspect of school. But as far as the sitting down and studying and all that, I just had no time for. I wasn't interested, and I dropped out of school when I was quite young, and then started working on a sheep farm in the South Island of New Zealand.
When did you first sort of get your foot in the door in hospitality and consider chefing as a career?
So I was in New Zealand. I just turned 18 years old, and I was a bit lost. I didn't really have any much direction, and I was working on a sheep farm, and my job was to take all the dags from the wool. So the dags is all the wool with the sheep poo on it, essentially. So when the shearers shear the sheep, they shear around their bum and get all the wool with the feces on it and put that in a separate bag. And then my job was to take that wool and put it into this machine that would shake and separate the wool from the feces. A really glamorous job. And I was doing this, and it was in this shed in the middle of nowhere in the South Island, and this big old machine. I had to wear ear muffs because it was so noisy, and the machine was, it would shake the whole shed, and then every half an hour I had to go underneath the floor of the shed and scrape out all the feces from under the shed where it all fell. Otherwise, it would all get kind of blocked up. And then the machine would stop working. And obviously, I was like, oh, I can't do this the rest of my life. And then my father's partner at the time explained at the Southern Institute of Technology, which is like the equivalent of TAFE in New Zealand. In Invercargill, they were doing a zero fee scheme to encourage students to go, populate Invercargill and go study there for free. So I jumped on board that. I signed up to do a cooking class. I got top of my class. I found something that I was kind of naturally good at, I enjoyed doing, and then I kind of never looked back from there.
With such an extraordinary upbringing in regards to food and so much knowledge gained at a young age, what was it like in commercial kitchens given sort of that background? Was it vastly different to what you had learnt in food previous to that?
It's very different, and it took me a while to kind of get back to that. I started working in large hotels and family restaurants in New Zealand, in Christchurch first, and then Queenstown. And then it wasn't really until I went to Canada that I really started kind of connecting with produce again. In British Columbia, in Whistler, I got a job at Araxi, which was a fine dining restaurant in Whistler, and they had that whole farm to table approach where they'd work to produce with producers, would be getting in massive whole halibut, caribou, all amazing produce and vegetables, and that's when I really kind of sparked that interest for quality produce and the whole process of how it's grown and caught. And then I continued that on with working in Sydney, where I took a job. I relocated to Sydney from Canada, and I took a job at Bilson's in Sydney. So we were doing the same thing there, and really using beautiful high-end local produce in more of a French fashion. And then through my time in Sydney, and Tony Bilson at the time had connections in France, so he got me connected with a chef in Honfleur, a 2 Michelin star chef in Honfleur, Normandy, at a restaurant called Sakwana. And then I went over there for 6 months and worked in Honfleur, and that was just a whole nother level. The ducks would come in with feathers, would have to pluck the ducks. The leeks came in, they still had dirt on them. would go meet the fishermen at the wharf, and the chef would like pick out what fish that they wanted to use on the menu that day, and then would prep everything fresh twice a day, everything for lunch service, would clean down the kitchen and prep the same thing for dinner service. So it was green beans or on the menu, for example, would have to prep them for lunch and then prep them fresh again for dinner, so that's hyper fresh, hyper local, really intense, working 18 hours a day, sometimes 6 days a week. And that was just the culture, behind the food there, and the intensity and drive of the chefs was just on a completely another level.
I just want to go back to Bilson's just for a moment. Tony Bilson, an absolute legend of the Australian culinary landscape. What was he like? Do you have any stories of what he was like to work with?
I don't have. He wasn't very involved in the day-to-day operations of the kitchen at that stage. He would like come in every now and again, and he would organise things. He had an event on every year that was called Cuisine Now, where he got Michelin star chefs from France to come over and cook their menus at Bilson's, and that was an awesome experience, definitely. But the main guy in charge of the kitchen back then was Diego Monez, a Peruvian chef who later went on to work at Ashford and Garçon and get in the world's top 50 and do that after Bilson's closed.
You spent some time at Tetsuya's as well. What was that like?
That wasn't too bad. I was briefly at Tetsuya's. Obviously, an amazing operation, and now, they've just closed the book on that amazing, 37 years of operation of a fine dining restaurant, which is just unheard of. So I found it quite monotonous and repetitive. I was on the ocean trout section, and that's all I kind of did. Yeah, so that's kind of all I did. The menu wouldn't really change, and I personally just wanted to have a little bit more freedom and work in a place where it was, the menu was changing a lot more, basically, and I could jump around a little bit more.
The venue that had a big impact on you as you rose the ranks to become executive chef was Black by Ezard, which you briefly mentioned at the beginning. But how did that gig come about, and what was it like working in such a big team?
It was a very, very simple situation. So I just came back from France. I was 26 years old or something at the time. I was staying with my uncle who lives in Sydney. And I needed a job because obviously I wasn't really getting paid a lot of money in France at all. And I spent, the winter season snowboarding in Austria. So I was pretty broke at the time and needed work. And then I just applied for a job on Seek. To be honest, I was just I just applied for a job on Seek. And then I went in for an interview, and that's where Craig Hemmings, who got me on board for the White Horse, interviewed me and hired me originally as the sous chef. And then after a year, the executive chef at the time left, and I took his position about a year into the role. But I have only fond memories of working at Black. The team was awesome. MC from PS40 was the bar guy. Back then, James Ordis of Bar Heather and Byron and Lo-Fi Wines was the sommelier. Craig Hemmings was the general manager. It was a big team. We used to get pumped. We used to do over 200 covers on a Friday, Saturday night at a one-hat kind of steakhouse level. But look, it was work hard, play hard back then.
Take us into that kitchen. That was your first executive chef role. What were the challenges that you faced, and what was it like for you?
The challenges back then for me was more kind of management related and how to deal with people. How to be a good communicator. It's very multicultural, the kitchen. You had people from all different ethnic backgrounds that all had to kind of get on the same page. So I'd say that was my main challenge, is just learning how to manage a large kitchen brigade and the communication. We already put a lot of good systems and procedures in place. The executive chef at the time came over from America, and he worked in big places like Aria in LA, sorry, not LA, in Las Vegas, and Joel Robuchon in Las Vegas, and between kind of him and me and the Star Casino, we already had a really good lot of systems and procedures in place. So all that sort of things was pretty straightforward. I had a really strong sous chef that was a massive support to me from a management kind of perspective. So yeah, that was it, and that's where I really started to have the freedom of developing my own dishes, doing my own kind of menus, and trying to figure out what my style of cuisine would be.
We've had Teague Gerrard on the show, and he's a legend of the Australian dining landscape as well. What sort of interactions did you have with him while you're in this role?
Look, Teague was an amazing kind of more of a mentor role for me back then, and he would, have his input and would collaborate on the menus together, and would try and, inject some of that Asian influence, which Teague is so well known for. But look, he was an amazing support and mentor for me and all the guys in the kitchen.
You decided to head back to WA, where you grew up as a really young kid. What was it like moving back over there?
Yeah, look, I kind of come to a stalemate where I was I'd been away for so long, and I had brothers and family back in Western Australia, and I was looking for a new challenge. So the opportunity came about to be the executive chef at Como the Treasury. So I just applied for that job and went through the interviewing process, and I was fortunate enough to land that position and relocate back to Western Australia. And look, I really enjoyed it to learn. I never cooked in Western Australia before 2015, so it was my first time cooking in Western Australia, discovering all the produce over there, learning about the Noongars and the 6 seasons, which we decided to create a whole restaurant concept around, which was Wildflower.
Tell us about Wildflower. It's won so many awards and such a unique sort of venue. Was that a chance for you to really sort of show your creative side as well?
Absolutely, and there was a lot of pressure on me back then. I had to open Post, which was a hotel main dining room, the lounge bar, which was where we did high tea, and then as well as that Wildflower, which was a highly anticipated fine dining restaurant. So that just released and but do stuff in a more high end environment again. From a creative perspective, it was awesome, and using all these native ingredients and flavors and incorporating them with my kind of classic French technique and training, and using Japanese seasonings. Look, it was very good as far as creativity, and just honing in on my technique and my style.
How different was the role at the Ritz-Carlton in Perth when you moved over to there compared to that at the Como?
It was very different. It was a lot more corporate, and it was a lot larger. At the Ritz-Carlton, there was 5 kitchens which I had to oversee across 4 different levels, and I had 48 chefs and kitchen staff on the roster. What the vision that I thought, what I was walking into and how I thought it would play out, it didn't. It was a completely different beast, and it turned out to be, mainly an administrative management position where I was spending a lot of time behind a desk in meetings, a lot of brand standards that I had to meet, and it took me away from any individuality, that I wanted to do. And it took me out of the kitchen. I was wearing 2 hats. I was trying to be the chef of Hearth, which is the signature restaurant, and they'd promote me to do that. And I was, doing this really cool wood-fired West Australian concept in there, but then I was wearing the hat of the executive chef, where I was accountable for the day-to-day operations of the kitchen department in this massive big, 210 room hotel with 5 different kitchens and 48 staff and a million things going on. And eventually, and then also in the middle of all that, there was COVID, which was an extremely difficult time for everybody, in hospitality, and having to, hire all my staff. Then I had to lay all my staff off. Then I had to hire all the staff again when coming out of COVID. And it was just exhausting, completely exhausting. And then after that experience, I just decided, look, I wanted to have a little bit more freedom and get back into the kitchen and be more creative and work in smaller, less corporate environments. So that's when I decided to resign from my position at the Ritz-Carlton and take a bit of time off. And then fortunately for me, the owner of Will's Domain reached out and was seeing if I was interested to work down there and be a part of that.
What sort of impact did the role initially have on you at Will's Domain, given that you were taken away from the kitchen, but this sort of opened up a new opportunity for you?
At Will's Domain, with Will's Domain, I started as doing a summer residency. So I was only supposed to go down there for the summer and do a summer residency, and I did that, and that was pretty successful. I enjoyed working in the country. I enjoyed, working with the owner and all the staff at Will's Domain, and then that turned into a culinary director role, and what I love about it is just there's no distractions. You can just focus on the cooking and the amazing produce that the region has to offer, and just working in the country. Will's Domain's up on a hill. It's got amazing view overlooking the winery with dams and bush and birds, and it almost reminds me being back in France, working in France, and having the space. The kitchen's really spacious, and we have all the equipment that we need. We have a nice small team of, highly trained, very good chefs. We have amazing relationships with our producers down there. We have a little garden where we use for mainly garnishes and herbs and flowers, and stuff like that. So it was just a super refreshing change that I needed at the time.
Your career is probably marked by amazing ability to run multiple kitchens or venues at the same time. Now you're doing the same, and one's in Sydney and one's in Western Australia. What sort of advice do you have for those that might be moving into a role that sort of has multifaceted sort of things like you're doing at the moment?
You need to replicate yourself. So you need to really get all your systems and procedures in place, have very clear directions, very precise recipes and methods, and it's training, and putting the right people in charge. So my success is, and what I pride myself on, is whether I'm in the kitchen or not, the food and the standards are going to be the same. And that's not easy to do. And a lot of chefs can't hand over control. They can't hand over control. So you have to learn how to hand over control. You have to be a really good delegator, a really good communicator, and really good at building those relationships with your staff, and just training, just drilling it into them, just training them until they can just, they're just another you.
Well, the white horse is firing now. What do you love about what you've created there? What makes it so sort of different to many other pubs?
So what makes it different is it has the casualness and the comfort of a pub, but it's far from a pub. It's in a pub. The building used to be a pub, but the menu and the offering, it's not a pub menu or offering. It's two words that don't go together, which is affordable luxury. You know what I mean? Like, so many people say, affordable luxury, and it's two words that shouldn't really go together, and it's really hard to do, but we do try to give guests that high-end experience without the price tag or the pretentiousness of having to go to a super fine dining restaurant where you have to refinance your mortgage to pay for dinner.
Well, you're doing amazing things. What do you love about what you do?
The people that you work with, the challenges, the problem-solving aspect. You never stop growing. The learning is never ending. You're always learning. You're always trying to get better. There's always problems to solve, challenges to overcome, which keeps you on your toes. And you need a lot of resilience to get through it. A lot of chefs don't. A lot of chefs exit the industry or go in a different direction, but I embrace it, and I like it. I like the kind of the craziness of the kitchen and the service and the fluidity of it, which always changing produce, it's always changing and evolving. I think it keeps me fresh and interested.
Well, you've got one of the most interesting roles in the country that spans all of us right across Australia, Jed. It's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear part of your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
No problem. Thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure being involved.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.